Hey there everybody, welcome to Intermediate Music Theory video number 12. In this video we're going to continue on with some more polyphony, specifically kind of like Renaissance style, later Renaissance style polyphony. Very similar to Baroque style polyphony. I don't know all of the ins and outs. I hope people realize when they watch these videos, I'm sure you do. I don't know like every single in and out. I can give you the gist, and then if need be someday I can research more and we can discuss these things deeper. But for now, it's kind of like we're going to go over the rules and regulations, common practices of later Renaissance polyphony. Real quick, I do want to talk about this idea, these rules and regulations, because this is what keeps people oftentimes, well, they say it keeps them from wanting to learn music theory, is, well, it'll box me in all the rules. It's like, first of all, your ear is already making you follow a certain set of rules of what you think sounds good and what you think sucks anyway. So you have your own internal music theory going on already. The other thing is, why would it box you in? Do you think like you would learn music theory and suddenly start playing differently? That'd be silly. I didn't. It's just, you learn it to learn it, for one. It's just cool to learn. If you love a musical instrument, why wouldn't you want to learn the things that have been before and the practices and the ideas? Because who knows, maybe you'll learn some things that you're like, oh man, I want to take that idea and develop it into my own or create my own thing in that same kind of idea. It's like polyphony that we're talking about. Maybe you want to write a polyphonic piece of music and you prefer like the sound of, Renaissance polyphony, and you're like, well, if I know those rules, I kind of know where to go. Or the more you learn about music theory and the more you have to, do ear training and learn these things, you start hearing things that you're like, oh, I always wondered how to get that sound. Well, now you know. You don't have to go looking for it. You know now. So anyhow, I get a little wound up about that idea of like, what'll box me in? It's like, you will box you in if that's your thought process. Otherwise, you learn it and you can do what you want. Man, I still play like Slayer style riffs that are all chromatic and messed up. there's a whole bunch of music to come later in like the modern era that's like 12 tone and all this chromatic stuff, or like you roll the dice and find 6 notes and then you write a piece of music based on those 6 notes, cluster chords and all this stuff. It's very, very dissonant and messed up. It's awesome though. You can do whatever you want, but why not learn all the inner workings while you're at it? Anyhow, I'm sorry. I got a little carried away. Back to polyphony. First thing we're going to talk about is the idea of a passing tone. What is a passing tone? A passing tone is generally thought of as more of a dissonant note that you're using to go by to get to the one you want to land on. So for example, here, that's an octave or a 1. We're going to think of, in polyphony, you think of everything sort of in intervals from each other. So this is a 1, and we're going to continue those notes like the first 3 notes of A minor. We're actually going to do this whole thing in A minor. Okay, so you got 1, 2, 3. The third is your target. The 2 is the more dissonant. Okay, so you're passing it. Passing tone. Okay. Whoop. There we go. F sharp doesn't belong in A minor unless you really want it to. Anyhow, so 1, 2, 3 over that lower A gives you a passing tone, or 3, 2, 1 is passing from 3 down to 1, and the 2 is kind of the throwaway note. Which we know is not true, right? It creates color, creates movement, but that's the idea of a passing tone. It's not your target. It's not the highlight of the show. You're going by it to get to where you want to be. Okay? Now, another similar idea is what's called a neighbor tone. A neighbor tone can be above or below, but it's basically like you start with your target, neighbor, back to your target. So in this case, we're holding a third here. We got a third. So if you go 3, 2, 2 is your neighbor tone. Or you could go 3, 4, 3, and the 4 is your neighbor tone. It's an upper neighbor or a lower neighbor. I threw a major chord in there, which I shouldn't have done. Doesn't matter. Anyhow, so that's neighbor tone. And then passing tone. So you can make passages that include both. So I'll try to play you a little passage here. This is not really a planned piece of music, nothing I've written down, just thing I'm fooling with, so I can show you the examples. Okay, nothing too special, just passing tones, neighbor tones, stuff like that. Okay, now another thing we're going to look at is what's called a suspension. Okay, what's cool about a suspension is it requires both melody lines to create the dissonance. One will create it, and the other one will resolve it. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is a 2-3 suspension. So we'll start here. You got a 3, drop to a 2, and then the other note, the lower melody line, drops, and then you've got a 3 there. So you got a 3, this melody line now creates a 2, this melody line drops and creates a 3, which is consonant again. So you got 3, 2, 3. If you're just looking at what the intervals currently are. But yeah, that's suspends because this note moved, resolve because this note moves. Hear that? Now you can pluck them all together so you hear better. But in a piece of music that's kind of moving along, you would not do that. It's kind of thing. Another suspension is what's called the 7/6 suspension. So in that case, we could start with an octave. The upper melody line drops, now creating a 7th, and the lower melody line goes up a whole step, creating now a 6th. Okay. Hear that? That's a 7/6 suspension. So there's a couple of like commonly practiced ideas for, you know, later Renaissance polyphony, and you work those into the piece you're writing. Neighbor tone up there. And you slowly start to put together what you want and where you want to hear it go using these passing tones and neighbor tones and suspensions and stuff like that. And then eventually, and we'll get into this later, you use, I think I did it actually in the first, yeah, I did. In the first video, I use a raised 7th to get what's called a cadence, a finishing move. So, for example, we're using A. I'll just play one melody line and you'll be able to hear that raised 7th and what it kind of does. So, hear that? And I'm sure you've heard that cadence idea a billion times in your life and never put together like what it is or what caused it. Well, in the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about it. It's kind of like the idea of harmonic minor, only we're using in this polyphonic way. Anyhow, those are the things I want to cover in this video. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. You're going to do awesome.